Hello, everyone. Welcome to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. This is your host, Becky McNattin, and I'm glad to have you listening as we live and share stories of mental health today. And I am joined by my guest host, Amanda Sullivan. Welcome, Amanda.
Thanks for having me.
So glad to have you back on the show. We've had you on a few times now.
Mm-hmm.
And you're a therapist who has a lot of training in the areas of trauma and what you and I call somatic therapy, which is a fancy way of saying the ways in which our bodies are impacted by emotions and psychological experiences. And we've had you on the show to process through several different topics related to trauma and the ways in which our bodies respond to difficult life moments. And we've referenced a concept in some of those shows that I wanted to spend an entire show talking about. And that topic is window of tolerance. And this might be, for listeners out there, this might be a term you've heard of before. If you've been in therapy, maybe you've talked to your therapist about window of tolerance.
Yep.
But Amanda, could you tell us what this means?
Yeah, I'm so excited to talk about it today. So window of tolerance is a concept that was developed by someone named Dan Siegel, who is a psychiatrist. And he really has worked a lot in this field of interpersonal neurobiology, which is really about how our behavior and emotions are impacted by our relationships and kind of the neurobiology, the intersection of behavior, emotions, and relationships.
So he came up with the term.
Yes, he did.
Okay.
He did. And so our window of tolerance is an optimal zone of emotional and physiological arousal for people to engage in like their day-to-day life. So a lot of times we're hearing terms like regulated and dysregulated. Those are very common terms right now. And so when we're in our window of tolerance, that is when we are regulated. And when we are outside our window of tolerance is when we are dysregulated. And we're going to talk more about what that means today.
Okay. So window of tolerance is that space maybe in between on either side, probably.
Yes.
Dysregulation.
Yep.
And whatever the heck regulated means.
Exactly.
Okay.
And you can even imagine a visual of a window. And, you know, if you look at a wall and there's a window, that space is the space in which you are regulated throughout the day. And above, we have something called hyperarousal, which we'll talk more about what that means. And below our window, we have something called hypoarousal, which we'll also talk about what that means.
Okay.
I think it's really also important for our listeners to know that being regulated is not the same as being calm.
Ooh, I really like that because I think that that's what we think a lot.
Exactly. Or that we're happy or that like life is good when we're in this window. And it's not. It's really, again, it's that capacity that we have to deal with emotions that might be challenging or difficult or situations that might cause emotions that are challenging or difficult or cause some sort of physiological reaction in our nervous system and our bodies.
Yeah, I really like that point because I have a feeling that even in my own life, I talk about, oh, I'm regulated because I feel settled or peaceful. You're talking about much more this concept of, am I able to access resources in order to cope with a moment that's occurring?
Exactly. And a lot of this has to do with ideas around safety and connection, which we're going to jump in more today in our conversation.
Yeah, so we talk about this term a lot in therapy.
Yep.
Around mental health, what would you say we're referring to?
Yeah, we're frequently using this term, especially in trauma work, like you mentioned. And we often have a goal in therapy to help people, what we say is increase their window of tolerance. And what that means is to increase one's capacity to deal with stress and emotions that come up in everyday life without moving into what we call survival states, which would be like fight, flight, freeze responses.
Okay.
Those are survival responses. And so being aware of our window of tolerance helps us to notice when we are moving between that regulation and dysregulation and to be aware of what those different states look like in our body.
Okay. Well, everybody, we're talking about window of tolerance today. Such an interesting topic. Right now, we're going to take a short commercial break, but stay tuned as we talk through what can cause us to move outside of our window of tolerance and what we can do to respond in those moments. Thank you for listening to Feels Out Loud. We will be back in just a moment.
All you got to do now. In a world full of strangers, you don't know who to trust. All you see is danger, trying to find what you
Welcome back to Feels Out Loud, brought to you by Becoming Together Therapy and Wellness. I am Becky McNattin. I want to dive right back into our discussion around this whole thing called window of tolerance. And Amanda, you referenced several things in our last segment that I want to talk all about in the next several minutes. But first, I want to start with, how does trauma affect window of tolerance?
That's a great question. Oftentimes, trauma will narrow our windows of tolerance, unfortunately. So typically, it's making it harder for us to feel regulated, or there are more things in our life that are triggering us. And when we're in our window, we have more capacity for like connection, communication, feeling a sense of safety. And of course, because of how trauma impacts our bodies and our nervous systems, it makes it more difficult to be able to feel safe and to feel connected to others around us, or even to ourselves.
Yeah, and it makes sense that experience of trauma would cause us really quickly to move outside of our window of tolerance. There might not be a slow 1 to 10. Like we would notice a slow and steady movement toward it. We could just move outside.
Totally. And it's something I actually wanted to remind our listeners of, is that we are supposed to have these responses. Fight, flight, freeze, these hyper and hypoarousal responses are part of adaptive strategies that are part of our biology. And so we need them to survive.
Yeah.
We need to have those responses sometimes. The problem that we often see with people who have trauma is that they're spending too much time in those states, or they're in those states when there actually isn't a real threat of danger. It's a perceived threat of danger.
Yeah.
Because of a loss of a sense of safety or connection.
The body is just doing something that it believes it needs to. And that's a protective strategy.
Yep.
So moving outside of our window of tolerance, what you're saying is that's our body's way of responding to the stimuli, and it's a way of trying to protect ourselves.
Totally.
It might not totally do that.
Right.
But it's a really beautiful response.
Yes.
So if we're thinking about window of tolerance, does that mean that we all have a different one?
It does. It does mean we all have a different window of tolerance. And even
That's super interesting.
And even that our window of tolerance can change.
Wow.
From probably even minute to minute, but day to day. And for sure, depending on what's happening in our lives. There are a lot of things that impact our window of tolerance. I think one of the first and foremost things is this idea of co-regulation, which is something we experience as a child. And that means that I learned as a child, did I experience an adult who was helping regulate my nervous system? And I learned that I could trust adults or people around me. And we learned actually how to regulate our nervous systems from people who are in close proximity to us.
Yeah.
Yep.
And we learned how they coped with their own.
Exactly.
So in part, our window of tolerance is developed by witnessing and modeling how regulation is responded to.
Exactly.
Or dysregulation is responded to.
And then, of course, there are events like we talked about, trauma, which can either be single event traumas or ongoing traumas that will affect our window of tolerance also. And again, what we learned that safety looks like. And I also think there's a lot of external things that impact our window of tolerance, like stress, lifestyle behaviors, like are we getting enough sleep? Are we moving our bodies?
Yeah, I just think about a few weeks ago, we had some people on the show who talked about basic functional parts of our health, like eating, sleep, life stressors, and how fundamental those are in our functioning. So if we're in a spot of extra work stress, life stress, maybe even transition, or if we're not sleeping well, those things are all going to impact our capacity to stay within a window of
within
tolerance.
our window. Yep.
But even sitting here, your window of tolerance is different than my window of tolerance.
Yes.
And for our listeners at home, whoever you listen to or whoever you live with probably has a different window of tolerance than you. And that's important to recognize because different things are also going to stimulate us to move outside of it.
Yep.
So not only are they different, but the activation is going to be unique to the individual.
Yes, we all have different things that will activate those hyper or hypoarousal responses in our nervous systems. And part of the work in trauma therapy or, even just regular therapy is just working on noticing what are the things that affect you in that way that push you outside of your window of tolerance.
Yeah. So you mentioned hyper and hypoarousal. Can you speak to those a little bit more?
Yeah. So hyper, if we're looking again at that window, hyper is the space above the window. And that is often a fight or flight response.
Okay.
And so again, we want to fight or we want to run away. And this is when our sympathetic nervous system becomes activated to a system of mobilization. So they describe this. I'm going to share some concepts from polyvagal theory today in our conversation. And so I was looking over some notes from a training I did, and I loved the way that they described it. Hyperarousal is protection through action.
Oh, yeah. That's a great, just one phrase.
Yes.
When we are above the window of tolerance, our body goes right into movement.
Yes.
Like to do something.
We need to do something to protect ourselves. So feelings you might experience include anger, irritability, agitation, anxiety. You might feel out of control. There is like increased responsiveness and reactivity. And again, this might look like fighting, physical aggression, running away, things like that.
Okay.
And then hypoarousal is like kind of the opposite of that. So it's that space below our window, which is oftentimes referred to as like a freeze or collapse response in trauma therapy. So that's our system of immobilization, and that's protection through disappearing. Which I
protection through disappearing. So protection through action.
Yep.
Protection through disappearing.
Yep. And so this often, for a lot of people who experience this as a response, it feels like your body is shutting down. You feel overwhelmed. You feel numb. You feel exhausted, depressed. You want to disconnect from a lot of things. And, you know, this might be like dissociation. People might look like they're zoning out. They're sleeping a lot, daydreaming. They sometimes make their bodies physically smaller. I notice this in sessions sometimes when people are going into a hypoarousal state is they'll physically get smaller.
Yeah, kind of shrink into themselves.
I've
done that.
Yeah.
Yeah, where my shoulders move in. I even kind of put my upper body towards my lower body.
Yep.
Kind of curl in a ball.
Yes. And sometimes we see people even get to the point where they are unable to speak or respond. And that is really confusing for people around them. I think oftentimes the hyperarousal responses are easier to see and notice in people.
Sure.
And hypo, people get more confused sometimes about what's happening. I noticed that a lot when I worked with kids. Of teachers would be like, why aren't they responding, or why aren't they talking, or why are they so shut down? It's because their body has moved into that state of feeling that it needs to disappear to stay safe.
Yeah, and I can see where it might be a little easier to notice what is occurring for a person when they move into action to do something, because we can observe those actions.
Totally.
It might show up as appearing cold or disinterested or somewhere else even. And that's hard for us to know because there's not anything to observe there.
Right. And again, I think I want to remind people that it's important to understand that like we're not consciously choosing these reactions. We're not having something stressful and saying like, I'm gonna fight as a response to this. Our biology is taking over and utilizing these strategies that have worked to protect us before. And whether or not they're actually doing that in reality, that's, you know, another part of the conversation, but that's really what their purpose is. And so if you notice yourself doing these things, first respond with like grace and compassion and I think thank yourself for the fact that you developed these responses to help keep yourself safe.
Would you say then that people have a tendency to do one or the other, or do they do both?
They do both.
Okay.
And it's very interesting. Actually, sometimes we'll see, it really does depend on the person. And I think that's my stance with lots of things is it depends on the person. But sometimes we'll actually move to hyperarousal first. And then if we notice that isn't working as a survival response, our body will then move into hypoarousal.
Okay.
So that can also happen, that you'll have one and then move into the other.
Okay. So that's good for people to know.
Yeah.
If that it doesn't necessarily mean it could be sort of a continuum there. It doesn't necessarily mean you choose one or the other and stay there.
Yeah.
You could have a combo of both.
Yes. I notice that most people have a combination, again, depending on kind of what's happening, what the, activation or trigger or stress might be. Mm-hmm. And again, their past experiences.
And you mentioned a little bit ago this concept of safety and how important that is in window of tolerance.
Yeah.
And certainly we need safety in our body, safety in our emotions and thoughts, safety in our environment and relationships. So safety is a big concept.
Yes.
And in the clinical world, we talk about safety in all of those realms.
Yep.
So how would you say safety in these areas impacts window of tolerance?
The more sense of safety that we have, the more it will expand our window of tolerance.
Okay.
So if we can work on helping our nervous system differentiate between maybe real threats and perceived threats, we will be able to stay in that window more often.
Okay.
Does that make...
It totally makes
Okay.
sense. Yeah. So for listeners who are wondering about their own window of tolerance or thinking about that as we're processing it right now, they could say, all right, that safety in our body, safety in our emotions and thoughts, safety in our environment and relationships, do I feel safe in those different areas? And if I don't, do I know why?
Right.
And is there real or perceived threat?
Exactly.
there?
Yeah. And I think it's a lot of what we do in kind of somatic and trauma work in therapy is working on noticing, when do I feel safe in a session, or when do I not feel safe? Are there certain things that a therapist is bringing up that I'm having a physiological reaction to from a place of wanting to protect myself or protect from moving outside my window of tolerance?
Yeah, and I could see where that kind of awareness would help someone in their regular daily life also know, which was what one of my questions was for you, on when do we reach the edge? Like, that we need to know what are the things that cause us these physiological activation responses.
Yep.
Because then we can know what to maybe do about it before we get out of the window of tolerance. And so how would you say we could know?
I think there's a lot of different ways to go about knowing. I think the first is, I'm assuming that some people, even as they're listening to this episode right now, are maybe even thinking of situations where they have been outside their window of tolerance.
I know I am about myself.
Yeah.
Well, even just thinking recently on when did I notice? And for me, I notice it when I'm already there. I might notice when I'm already sitting in a space of what that looks like.
Right. So if you can think back to the last time you were outside your window of tolerance, thinking and reflecting, and maybe it's jotting some things down of like, what were the thoughts I was having? What were the feelings I was experiencing? What behavior was I displaying? What physical symptoms? What did I feel physiologically in my body? And do I know what caused me to get there?
That's a really good point. Kind of walking it back on what happened before that, and what happened before that, and what happened before that.
Because once you're in your window, you're not doing logical, or once you're outside of your window, the part of your brain, the prefrontal cortex, which is the thinking, problem solving, that part of your brain shuts down, and our amygdala is like what takes over in terms of our survival response. So you can't be in the middle of being in hyperarousal. You're not going to be able to reflect on like, why am I in hyperarousal right now?
Oh, for sure. Yeah. It's after that moment.
Yep.
When your body feels safe again, your body moves back into its window of tolerance.
Yep.
That gives our brains the capacity to what you're referring to is called executive functioning, where we can think again.
Yeah.
And this could be moments. We're not necessarily talking a really long time. It could be seconds even where we move back in. But that is what gives us the opportunity for reflection on that moment and saying, okay, how did that feel? Particularly, how did that feel in my body?
Yeah.
I love the idea of you saying, what was I thinking about? What was I experiencing emotionally? And what just happened in terms of what might have impacted getting me there?
Yeah. And I think we can go into a little bit more detail. So, of course, actual threats to our physical and emotional safety are going to cause this response.
Yes, good point. In terms of like the things that would cause us to move outside of our window of tolerance. If you are actively experiencing a lack of safety, yes, you're going to.
And I really want people to know there is a lot of discourse, I think, in the self-help world and online and podcasts around nervous system regulation. And I love that we're talking about nervous system regulation, but I also want people to know that the goal is not that you will always be in your window of tolerance, because you have to have these responses sometimes to survive.
Yes.
But the goal of therapy and of working on your window of tolerance is to increase the size of your window and the amount of time that you're spending there. But it is not reasonable for anyone to think that they would never have a fight, flight, or freeze response.
I love that. Yeah, I love that you say that. And one of my favorite things about you as a human being is that you reference this in, we need to have distress.
Yeah.
The goal of of even processing distress isn't to never experience it again. It's to understand what's going on for us when we do. And to know how to cope with those moments as we are. And to give ourselves compassion and grace for the fact that the experiences are occurring. So it isn't to say I'm going to remove that from my life. It's to have an insight and a trust in self that I can respond to this moment.
Exactly.
Or I can be in this moment.
And
I'm actually really glad that you bring up, we might experience actual moments of not being safe. To not play games with our mind. And is this a real or perceived threat? There might be real threats. And to give an example, someone might be yelling at you. And that is going to be a lack of emotional safety. If someone is yelling at you, or perhaps maybe you're at work and you witness a conflict that's occurring between two coworkers, that's going to cause a reaction in you. And rather than say, is this a real or perceived threat? No, this is where I am right now. I'm in my fight, flight, freeze response.
Well, and that's actually a great segue into the next thing that often causes us to go outside our window of tolerance is anything that might be experienced as a threat to our nervous system, even though it maybe isn't an actual threat, which might be somewhat witnessing other people yell at each other. So, for example, if you grew up in a home where there was a lot of conflict and yelling between your parents, potentially, beyond maybe what is considered there has to be some conflict in relationships, right? But I'm talking about extreme, maybe emotional or physical abuse in your home. Witnessing other people yelling or fighting would probably be a big trigger to your nervous system. If that is something that still, and most people are going to have some response to people yelling. But for us to know that these things that we've experienced that serve kind of as triggers or activations to our nervous system is our nervous system responding to the fact that we have experienced situations before that did feel unsafe.
That's a really good point.
So one example I had is if you let's say as a kid you had a parent who really responded negatively when you got a bad grade in school. Okay. And that became a situation that maybe did lead to emotional or physical abuse as a kid. Then as an adult, what might happen is if you get bad feedback or you get critical feedback at work, that might be a cue to your nervous system of you're in danger.
Right. And the goal of therapy there would be to understand the connection and link to it.
Yes, exactly.
And also to provide some resources for an individual to cope through the moment of we're outside our window of tolerance. Kind of the recognition of here's where I am. Here's perhaps how I got here. And an understanding of that. But that brings us to, so we're outside of it. What the heck do we do?
That's a great question.
How do we return when we aren't in it?
So I just first, again, want to acknowledge that this is a challenging thing to do.
Yes.
So please know that if you're working on trying to manage your reactions to being outside your window of tolerance, that it does take time and it takes practice of utilizing these strategies, and that if it doesn't work the first time, keep trying it.
And we sometimes need a therapist, someone to help us be a partner in this process to practice them.
It's so funny you say that, because I was going to say this, going back to this whole idea of co-regulation that we often experience as children. And if we didn't maybe have that experience often as a child, who in our lives now might serve that purpose? So do we have a partner who could help us, or a friend or a therapist who can help us learn what does it feel like to be safe when I'm having these big feelings? What is someone who is regulated? How can they respond to me? How can they validate my feelings? And so if you have the capacity to have someone in your world who can help with co-regulation, especially at the start of this journey, that's really beautiful and really helpful in this process. In terms of other coping strategies, before I kind of go into what the strategies are, I want to say a few things. First is that sometimes, because it is so hard to access these strategies when you're outside your window, creating a list or creating some sort of toolbox for yourself is really helpful in terms of accessibility when you're already outside your window or at the edge. It's very hard to recall information that is not accessible to you.
That's a good point.
And that I always encourage people to use somatic, which are those body-based strategies, before cognitive strategies, which is trying to change your thinking. So cognitive or somatic strategies sometimes include like moving our body, and that's going to look different for everybody. For some people, it's using very gentle movement. Maybe it's just standing up out of your seat if you're in hypoarousal and maybe doing some gentle swaying. If you're in hyperarousal, you might have to do something more significant like dancing or shaking or maybe even running to kind of complete that stress response cycle. Breathing strategies are great. I really encourage people to try some different breathing strategies because people's nervous systems do respond differently to certain types of breathing. So we talk a lot about deep breathing, but sometimes for some people, holding their breath for a few seconds actually really helps. Or learning other types of breathing can be helpful in regulating our nervous system.
Yeah, that's a really good point. It isn't only deep breaths.
Finding smells or sounds that are soothing to you. Smell is one of our senses that is most strongest attached to both positive experiences and maybe challenging or difficult experience. So if there is a scent to you that feels like it brings back positive memories, that can be really helpful. Changing our body temperature, so using ice or cold water or something that's warm can really help regulate your nervous system. I'm looking at my list here. I just want to make sure I don't miss anything.
Those are all really good points and even in my own life, I can think about, I have run my wrists under super cold water. Something that kind of startles your system to bring an awareness to the present moment. And therapists use lots of strategies around what would help your body bring it back to this current moment. We sometimes use the word grounded to say that. But I love the tools that you have or that you're sharing, because these are things we might have access to pretty readily, or we are always with our bodies to tense ourselves up, to either hold our breath or to slow our breath down. Try both and see what works. Because there are going to be moments even through the day that we move outside of our window of tolerance. Super quickly. We are doing this without thinking about it. So practicing the strategies, and you mentioned a few minutes ago, the more we practice them, the more bodily memory there is of utilizing them. And of course, with anything that we practice, the more we do that, the more attuned we get to doing it quickly and automatically.
And I really do encourage people to then also pay attention to how does your body feel physiologically after you use one of those strategies. And that's part of helping to figure out what works for you, because all of these strategies are not going to work for everyone. A few other ones, sour candies, humming. And if you're in a state of hypoarousal, it can be really you said grounding. One thing we do a lot is kind of orienting ourselves back to the present moment. And so that's just even looking around the room that you're in and finding things that are red, finding things that are orange, finding things that are green. And that helps bring you back to the present moment, or even narrating where you are right now and what you're doing there and why you're there can be really helpful in returning to a sense of safety and the present moment.
I do that a lot. One of my primary go-to strategies is to tell myself what I'm wearing and notice something in the room that I've never seen before.
Oh, I love that.
And even if it's often a room I've been in before, but trying to find a detail that I haven't seen in the way that I remember it. So something I haven't seen before.
It's great.
Can we practice one?
Sure.
Okay.
Yeah. I would love to practice with you something that I call safe or calm place, if that's okay.
100% that's okay. I like safe and calm places.
In the spirit of autonomy, I want you to pick what word resonates more with you. I think, again, this goes back to you really picking what feels best for your nervous system. So is it the word safe? Is it the word calm? Is it the word peaceful? Could also be even grounded.
Okay, so listeners, I'm going to pick this, but I also want you to pick what Amanda just said for you. You listed off a few. I'm going to go with peaceful because I like that word a lot. That's a centering word for me.
Perfect. So I want you to just feel your feet planted on the floor. Feel what that feels like and your bottom in the chair. And you can have your hands on your legs if you want, or just somewhere where they feel comfortable. And I want you to just start with taking a deep breath in through your nose and exhaling out through your mouth. We're going to do 2 more of those at whatever pace feels good for you. So inhale through your nose and exhale. And do 1 more. Inhale through your nose and exhale. Now I want you to think of this idea of feeling peaceful and to either allow your mind to drift to either a real or imaginary place that feels peaceful to you. It might be in the mountains, it might be in nature, it might be a building that has lots of things that feel peaceful to you. And once you focus on that image, if you wouldn't mind sharing it with me.
Oh, I'm at the beach.
Could have guessed that.
You could have guessed that. You know me well. And I'm listening to the sounds of the ocean. And that sound for me is almost like a melody or a lull. And so I hear the waves and I am watching a sunset.
Beautiful.
And my feet are in the sand and I kind of dig them in to feel that all around my foot.
Beautiful. You were like a few steps ahead of me. I was going to ask you to describe more about what you're seeing, what you're experiencing in this place.
And what I feel is a little bit of a breeze because the wind does that as I'm sitting there. And when I'm in that space of peace, I'm kind of at the edge of the water. So there is an episodic, the waves come up a little far, so they run underneath me. And that kind of draws me back to the water, the next wave that's coming. It's not always, so I'm not in the water.
Okay.
But I'm right on that edge where sometimes I feel it.
How do the water and sand feel, like temperature-wise?
It's a little cool, but nice, not like stark.
It's refreshing.
Where all of a sudden I'm freezing.
Okay. What do you smell?
Well, I kind of smell salt. I guess that would be the ocean. Sort of like that oceany vibe of weeds. So like what kind of washes up, but mostly like a mist in the air, and I that causes these sense of salt.
Okay. I want to just have you take another deep breath in and continue focusing on kind of what this place looks like and all of those sensations you're experiencing. Just allow yourself to enjoy them for a moment. Focusing on all those things you shared with me. If there's anything new that pops up in terms of your senses, you can share that with me, but it's okay if there isn't.
Well, I find myself smiling, and I'm even doing it now as I wonder, I can't see listeners at home.
Yeah.
But I wonder if listeners, if you're doing this as well, if your eyes are closed, putting myself there is like a gift to myself because I'm picturing a moment where I'm actually sitting there and I'm almost looking at my own face.
Yeah.
And I can see myself. It's sort of joy/serenity.
It sounds beautiful.
It is beautiful. Yeah.
And so this is your peaceful place. Are there other emotions that you're experiencing while you're in this peaceful place?
Well, I think I'd say connected to myself. I can definitely picture times where I'm present with other people. You've been a person who's been with me at places like this. I feel settled. And I think for me personally, when I'm in spaces like that, I'm much more open to, I notice more, I'm curious more. I look around and I wonder about something new. I tend to look farther out, maybe in the sky. What else do I see? Or maybe farther down me on the beach. Things like that where it's like, what else would I see or hear?
Why don't you take just one more moment here? And I want you to take a moment just to tune into your physical body and to just notice how this feels being in this peaceful place for your physical body. Like, what sensations do you notice? How does it, maybe how does your physical body feel different than when we started? And I should have asked you before we started, but.
Well, I would say I feel, when we say peaceful, like go to your peaceful place, I would say I feel peaceful in my body. It's like kind of like a blanket came around me, and there's this energy that I feel that I didn't have before I started.
Sounds beautiful.
So this is something people could do.
Yes.
And when you say kind of calm or safe or peaceful place, the idea is that you would imagine this.
Yes.
And then return to it. Like, think about this place.
Yes.
With how much frequency?
However often you need to.
Okay.
You could do it multiple times throughout the day.
Okay.
It is a strategy that we do use in trauma therapy. If we notice that people are outside their window of tolerance, sometimes we'll bring them back into their peaceful or calm place, or we'll end a session that way. But we really want people to be accessing these strategies whenever they need to, in order to get back to that sense of feeling grounded and regulated.
Yeah, well, I love that we're talking about this because so often we as therapists talk about how the mind can be challenging for us. So our mind can take us to all of these moments that aren't occurring, or that already have occurred, and how our brains can kind of get away from whatever the current moment is. Even that our bodies move into things we don't plan.
Right.
That's moving outside the window of tolerance. But we are always with our minds. And the gift that it can offer us in imagining things that have brought us safety, calm, peace. We can go there anytime. We don't need any other resource than the brain that we already have that's with us all the time.
Right.
So when we talk about a resource or a tool, you are with you and you have this ability to do anytime. That's the coolest thing.
Super cool.
And it helps. It does help.
Yeah, it does help.
So when we talk about expanding our window of tolerance, we're sort of talking about using things like this. Can you say a little bit more about expanding window of tolerance?
Yeah, expanding window of tolerance, I would say, is really something that is going to take time. It's a goal of trauma work, and what it just means is that our window is growing so that we're able to handle or return to that regulated place when we are more dysregulated, that we're not getting outside of our window so quickly or so often. And so a lot of this can come from this kind of work when you are already regulated, of noticing, what does safety feel like to me? What does connection feel like to me?
Yeah.
When do I feel that?
Kind of like what we just did, because I was not dysregulated when I did that. But when we're in spaces of regulation, we can practice these things that give us a muscle memory or a cellular memory of the tools.
There are two tools I also wanted to share with you in helping to expand our window of tolerance. So the first one is called glimmers. Have you heard of glimmers, Becky?
No.
Love glimmers. So glimmers are like the opposite of triggers, basically. So glimmers are like small positive moments of joy or connection. And part of the idea is that we will spend time searching for these or noticing them in our day-to-day life.
I love that.
And to notice our emotional and physical reactions to these moments of safety, joy, and connection. Because I think so often we're looking for the times when we do feel triggered. We're trying to make sense of those.
Totally.
But what about looking for those moments where we do feel connected to others, when we do feel safe?
And hanging on to them.
Yeah. Another one that I love is what's called a touchstone. So a touchstone is an item or a sensation that helps us feel connection or safety, or that has personal meaning for us. So like some examples could be like pictures, blankets, items from your childhood, a gift from someone that you feel connected to, jewelry, a certain song, a certain smell, an item that represents a moment in time that you felt a sense of safety or connection. Because what we really want to do is increase the amount of time that we have those experiences. That helps expand our window.
That's a really good point. And I would surmise then the more that we surround ourselves with those things, or remind ourselves of those things. So we don't have to have like 80 items around us. But the more that we are reminding ourselves that those things exist, the more we're telling our bodies it has experienced safety.
Exactly.
We are balancing out the experiences of lack of safety with a conscientious and an intentionality on the things that have brought us safety. Which is amazing. What a cool discussion this has been. It's leaving me thinking about how much glimmers need to be a part of my day, and how much touchstones are a part of my day. So much to think about here. We're going to head to a commercial break, but when we come back, we're going to talk through listener questions. Feels Out Loud will process your thoughts in just a moment.
Nobody else, all you got to do now
We are back again with Feels Out Loud, and this part of the show is where we talk through questions from you all, our listeners. If you have a question related to mental wellness, sharing feelings, or topics for each week that you would like us to process through, please visit our website at becomingtogethermn.com and find the Feels Out Loud page to submit a question directly. You sure can email us at contact@becomingtogethermn.com as well. And of course, follow us on social media. We really do want to hear from you and what you're wondering about. And I want to say a thank you to the listeners who have sent in questions about their life experiences connected to distress, some difficult life moments, grounding, and with this whole idea of window of tolerance in mind. And Amanda, we had a couple of questions that I picked specifically. The first one being, how can I support my child when they are clearly outside of their window of tolerance? So we're talking about, how do I help another human being then?
Great question. First suggestion I have is go pick up Dan Siegel's book, Whole Brain Child. It's amazing, and there'll be tons of resources there for you to help figuring out how to respond to your kiddo. But what I will tell you right now is regulate yourself first. So let's go back to that idea of co-regulation. If you keep your nervous system regulated, that will help your child's nervous system regulate to yours. And this is so hard. It's so hard as a parent because oftentimes our kids' behavior is pushing us outside our window of tolerance.
Yes.
And so to work on figuring out what strategies are going to work for you to stay regulated when your kid is dysregulated. That's first. Second is model the tools that we've talked about for your kid. And
good point.
And, one example is just even starting to do some deep breathing.
Yep.
Just
start it.
Yeah.
Just start it.
So again, co-regulation and then modeling with your kiddo and then see if they will follow suit. Again, that whole idea of nervous system regulation, it's like if your kid is open to it, give them a hug. I know that maybe feels counterintuitive if they're clearly outside their window of tolerance and struggling. But again, their nervous system is going to respond to that connection and that safety that you're providing for them.
Yeah. And from that idea of co-regulation, you doing some things that will keep you within your window of tolerance, like turn on some music.
Yep.
Go get something to a mint, or as you said, like a hard candy or something like that. That is the modeling that we're talking about. Do it. Just do it.
Yeah.
So that kind of leads to the next person who had a question around, if I observe someone seeming to be outside of their window of tolerance, is this something I should tell them?
Well, again, that's a great question. It depends really on the situation. I wouldn't say to you, Becky, if I saw you outside your window of tolerance, Becky, you're clearly outside your window of tolerance right now. I don't think you would respond super favorably to that. But what I might say is, Becky, you seem really angry right now. Can you tell me more about what's going on? Or Becky, I noticed that you're raising your voice at me. Are you upset? Are you angry? Are you frustrated with me? When I notice people in session that are in hypoarousal, I might say, hey, it seems like you're starting to shut down. Your body is getting smaller. It seems like you're not necessarily with me. So maybe not telling them that they're outside their window of tolerance, but reflecting back to them the emotions or behaviors that you are seeing that make you kind of have that thought in your head, like maybe they're outside their window of tolerance.
Yeah.
And that actually helps other people also build awareness of when they're outside their window.
Sure, because as we said in the show, our bodies are doing this without us knowing.
Yep.
And they just are, it's just doing it.
Yep.
So hearing about, and I love your phrasing around, share what you notice. Don't share the interpretation of it.
Yeah.
Because window of tolerance would be the interpretation of what's occurring.
Yep.
Reflect to someone what you're seeing happening, or how it's landing for you.
Yes.
This feels angry right now.
Yeah. And be curious, which is, the next step. So it's first noticing and then being curious about what's happening.
And that does a couple of things. One is shares what is happening in the moment. It certainly offers a compassion around how it's experienced and with a curiosity of what's occurring for the person, but also might help them identify how is it that they might be outside of their window of tolerance.
Yep.
I absolutely love that. This has been such a cool show. We're already at the end of it for today. Thank you, everyone, for listening this morning. And join us next week as we process more mental health-focused topics. And in the week ahead, be kind to yourself. Remember that connection fosters wellness. And your voice is one that the world around you needs to hear, everyone. Share yourselves, friends.
Try again, some do.